Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Richard Melendez.
And I'm Sachi Slomoff.
In our show this time, we'll cover the Hawaii to Zero HIV Cure Initiative at the UH Cancer Center in Kakaako.
The initiative seeks to conduct HIV cure and prevention research and to transform Hawaii into the first HIV-free state in the U.S.
The program took place on a given Saturday morning at the UH Cancer Center adjacent to the John A. Burns Medical School in Kakaako.
The room was filled with hundreds of doctors, health workers, and the public from all parts of the community, and involved a very high-level discussion of the advanced scientific research being done in HIV/AIDS.
Aloha, aloha, aloha.
Virginia Pressler, Director of the Hawaii State Department of Health. She previously served as Deputy Director for Health Resources Administration and the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer at Hawaii Pacific Health.
Even in the U.S., for the past 5 years, there have been an estimated 45,000 to 50,000 new cases of HIV annually. The number of new infections seems to have plateaued at this unacceptably high level. We can and we must do better. With over 25 years of experience in research, we now need to refocus our work for a Hawaii to zero, a U.S. to zero, and a world free from AIDS. A cure or a vaccine for HIV is our ultimate goal. We know humans can go beyond controlling infections to full elimination of deadly pathogens. Smallpox is a shining example. We know that finding a cure or eliminating an infection takes persistence, political will, financial resources, and the combined efforts of many stakeholders. We need to make greater use of data to help us all to prioritize our efforts and use resources where they are most needed and can make the greatest difference. We need to guard against disparity in access to services and health outcomes. We need to maintain a particular focus on Hawaiian and Pacific Island populations who are often underserved in healthcare. We need to target our efforts to those disproportionately impacted by HIV, particularly MSM. And we need to ensure availability and access to HIV services on neighbor islands where the number of HIV providers is limited. The Department of Health thanks all our partners and stakeholders, and particularly people living with HIV, for all the work you do to bring us to the point of discussing Hawaii to zero. At the same time, we request the support of the full community to reduce new transmissions and care for those living with HIV until we do get to zero. We can make a difference now based on our current knowledge and experience dealing with HIV. Here's to Hawaii to zero. Mahalo.
Cecilia Shikuma. She is the director of the Hawaii Center for AIDS, a UH Center of Excellence for HIV research, training, and care. She is also professor of medicine and the Edwin C. Cadman Endowed Chair at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. Dr. Shikuma talked to us about why we need a cure and the problem with current inflammation.
In 1995, we had the FDA approve the use of protease inhibitors. They brought in an era of potent antiretroviral therapy. As a consequence of that, deaths due to AIDS dramatically fell. The CD4 count, which is a measure of immune status, starts to increase once you start people on antiretroviral therapy. And the viral load decreases to what we call undetectable levels. But we soon found out that this was inadequate to effect a cure, because if you were to interrupt the art right here, sooner or later, although people varied in the duration of time they could control the virus, but sooner or later, the virus would just come back. And so currently, HIV is not a curable disease, except for one patient that we'll hear from later. So why do we need meds? Okay, if it's not curable, it means that we need to continue antiretroviral therapy as a lifelong medication. And we do have a lot of chronic illnesses. We take medicines day in and day out for cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes. But with all chronic illnesses, this requires a commitment to adherence. And we are asking relatively young people, and because of the demographics of our population, people who are poor, maybe homeless, have marital and family instabilities, and might have substance abuse issues, to really adhere to therapy. And, having tried, I think, in my 20s to be compliant with birth control pills and not being successful, you can imagine that this is really a challenge. But the other problem is that there might be long-term side effects, some of which we know about, others we don't. And, if you're 20 and you're facing 40, 50 years of medication use, you could see that this could be a very major problem. This is the AIDS info at the NIH's websites, annual estimated wholesale cost of co-formulated combinations. Antiretroviral therapy is good enough so that we can control people with one tablet daily. And these two medications, Triumeq and Stribild, are on the preferred list of the HIV guidelines. But you could see that wholesale, the annual cost for someone to take this medication is about upwards of $30,000 a year. And, it's not that a triplet that used to be our current favorite several years back was any better. In fact, it was really higher. And if you multiply this by the number of people that's in the United States, you could see that it's a phenomenal resource that we have to put up with. And it gets even worse if you consider that there are 40 billion people in the world that's infected, 40 million people infected with HIV in the world. We only provide therapy for 36%. I think it may be up to about 41% now. And we're spending $20 billion to do that. And you can see that it is a tremendous drain on resources. And we're going to keep this up for the lifetime of all these individuals that are HIV infected, and I think that's not a sustainable goal. If we're going to take care of our HIV infected people, we really need to shut down the virus. And so as we go to Hawaii to zero, what I think I would like to say is that sure, we can try all these modalities to shut down inflammation. And there's a lot of researchers who are trying to do that. There's a study of statin use, which is a drug for cardiovascular disease that has anti-inflammatory tendencies. And if you decrease inflammation, you might decrease the HIV in your cells in the body. But really, this whole thing is caused by HIV. If you shut down the virus, I think you shut down inflammation. And I think we will improve the chances of really getting everyone to a ripe old age of 70.
Mario Stevenson, who is a professor in the Department of Medicine and chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases of the Center for AIDS Research at the University of Miami Leonard M. Miller School of Medicine. He is a molecular virologist who has been working on the viral etiology of AIDS for 25 years. His research provides insight into the mechanisms regulating HIV replication and pathogenesis.
There are, of course, realities to the cure, illustrated very recently by a study from Dan Kuritskas and colleagues, where they were trying to recapitulate what happened with Timothy by using bone marrow transplant to try and rid infected individuals of their infected cells. So what happened in the Boston study is that 2 individuals underwent a bone marrow transplant, but in contrast to what happened with Timothy's transplant, they received cells from individuals who did not have this unusual mutation, CCR5, that is a critical receptor for the virus to allow it to gain entry into cells. Viruses have to get into cells in order to capitalize on cellular machinery for replication. But to get into a cell, it has to open the door, and the door handle for HIV is a protein called CCR5. 1 in 1,000 Caucasians don't make that protein. Immunologically, they're quite fine. But those individuals have no door handle, so the virus can't gain entry into the cell interior. So what Dan Kritzkis and colleagues were trying to explore is, was that an essential part of the cure, or was the transplantation process itself, using myeloablation and other chemicals, part of the reason for curing the virus in Timothy's case? And as shown here in the bottom, after the transplant, the virus became undetectable. It became undetectable in blood, but it also became undetectable in the tissues. The individuals were still on therapy at that point, so based on their inability to detect the virus, they then took the individuals off therapy, and the virus remained undetectable here in patient B for the best part of 10 months, and then at 10 months, the virus came raging back. This is an example of the extreme ability of HIV to basically hang in and resist eradication.
Lishomwa Ndhlovu. He is an associate professor in the Department of Tropical Medicine and an investigator in the Hawaii Center for AIDS. His research laboratory of molecular immunology and infectious diseases focuses on understanding how HIV affects the immune system and how this will inform on strategies to prevent, slow, or eliminate HIV infection and optimize quality of life.
Why do we need a cure for HIV? Life expectancy remains reduced on antiretroviral therapy. There's ongoing morbidity, even though you're antiretroviral therapy. It does appear to be driven by immune activation. We really need to prevent HIV transmission, and I think we're going to have a nice discussion afterwards on strategies that we can implement to try to reduce HIV transmission. Still a lot of stigma and discrimination, and that sort of leads us to try to find ways to get people to come in and get therapy. Lifelong adherence, as we've seen, is really challenging. There's toxicity, and there's also the cost issue. And Dr. Shikuma really pointed out that really in 2015, we're going to spend about $22 billion just on investments for prevention, treatment, care, and support. So how do we make this epidemic go away? There's clearly behavior modifications, and we're going to hear some really nice talk by Jane Simoni later on today. Antiretroviral therapy is really the mainstay that we have as our arsenal. The vaccination efforts are ongoing, and really eradication and cure is where we're here today to try to figure out how to do that. Mario has really nicely highlighted the path by which HIV enters and replicates. This is sort of just a simplistic view of how HIV attaches to these CD4 memory T cells. The DNA gets released and it integrates into your genome. And these proteins are interacting with the host machinery to release viral particles. And on the right side of the slide, you can actually see mature virions being produced. This image is really interesting because these are one of the first images you can actually see HIV. Unfortunately, these images were performed with artificial cells, so not from patients, and really artificial HIV virions from patients that were infected into these cells. And anyway, it does illustrate HIV virions being released by electron microscopy. So these are some of the early slides to visualize HIV budding from the CD4 cells. But when you do get infection, this is the course of HIV. Within the first few weeks, there's a reduction in your CD4 T cell counts and the virus goes up. What you notice, though, in the red line is that the CD4 counts actually start to rebound over here, and that's really your immune system coming into play. And mostly, as we pointed out, these CD8 T cells come in and they try to control the replication of the virus. And you get this set point for several years, and there's a sort of an inflection point around here, and we're still quite sure what happens, but there's a total crash in your immune system. The CD8s don't work anymore, the CD4 count drops, and the viral levels start to increase. And with a low number of CD4 cells, where is that reservoir of cells being sustained? And we do suspect there are other cells that are sustaining the virus when you lose your CD4 cells. And then there's a point up to 9 to 12 years where your immune system is just unable to cope, the viral levels increase, and you develop a syndrome of AIDS. Thankfully, with antiretroviral therapy now, we're able to block that process. However, we want to find out ways that we can actually intervene, and we've heard a little bit about treatment as prevention in that early stage before you get infected, but also once you get infected, we have to think about an eradication or at least a functional cure to be considered.
Timothy Ray Brown, an AIDS patient. He's the editor of the Cure Report and the co-founder of both the Cure for AIDS Coalition and the World AIDS Institute. Globally known as the Berlin patient, he's the first person in the world to be cured of HIV.
Timothy is an American who was diagnosed in 1995 while attending university in Berlin. Over the next 11 years, he was successfully treated with antiretroviral therapy, a combination of medicines that inhibit the replication of HIV in the body.
In 2006, Timothy was diagnosed with leukemia and was treated with chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant. After the transplant, HIV was no longer found in his blood. He's the editor of the Cure Report and co-founder of the Cure for AIDS Coalition and the World AIDS Institute.
I was attending school in Berlin in 1985 when I tested positive for HIV. I was terrified and thought for sure I was going to die. Some of my friends had already died from AIDS. A cure was never discussed back then. I was prescribed only AZT. Then the protease-enriched drug cocktail was realized. The next 11 years were pretty uneventful. It wasn't until 2006, while living in Berlin, that I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. This was bad news. A young hematologist, Dr. Gerhuter, started me on chemotherapy the very next day. I developed pneumonia early on. I had to stop my third round of chemo halfway through when I developed a sepsis infection. Tubes were placed into my heart. I should have died. I was released from the hospital and my leukemia appeared to be in remission. Yeehaw! I took a vacation to Italy, doctor's orders. Unknown to me, Dr. Huter was reading about something called a rare CCR5 receptor gene mutation, Delta 32. In 2007, while I was on a trip to the US, I soon found out that the leukemia returned. Shit, not again. Initial attempts at a different chemotherapy were not successful. I was going to die. However, a stem cell transplant became a viable option. Then, eureka! Dr. Huter had a revolutionary stem cell treatment idea. Why not use a compatible donor who had the CCR5 mutation, someone who is naturally immune to HIV? Dr. Huter thought maybe it would not only cure my cancer, but also my HIV.
Jane Simoni. She is a psychologist with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and HIV/AIDS Network Coordination Behavioral Science Consultative Group. Her research focuses on behavioral issues related to HIV, including development of HIV medication adherence interventions and developing peer support strategies and interventions to promote health.
So basics of HIV transmission there are only 5 fluids involved: blood, vaginal fluid, breast milk, pre-seminal fluid, and semen. And to transfer HIV, it requires fluids from a person living with a virus to come in contact with a mucous membrane or damaged tissue, or to be directly injected into the bloodstream from a needle or syringe into another person. So it gives us 5 ways that you can transmit HIV: through sexual contact, through injection drug use, during pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding from mother to child, through some kind of occupational exposure, and then very rarely these days, blood transfusions or organ transplant. So that's it. Those are the 5 ways we know about, and we've known these from pretty early on in the epidemic. So from an individual level, HIV prevention is pretty straightforward. And if they can talk about an AIDS-free generation, why in Hawaii can't we dream about having an HIV-free state?
Tim McCormick. He directs the HIV Medical Management Services Section, STD AIDS Prevention Branch, and the State Department of Health. He supervises 3 programs that provide access to HIV-related medical care: the Hawaii Seropositivity and Medical Management Program, the HIV Drug Assistance Program, and the Hawaii Insurance Continuation Program.
Hawaii law requires that HIV providers, physicians, as well as laboratories, report to the Department of Health, and state law also protects the confidentiality of those case records. And at the Department of Health, we use the HIV case data in several ways. First of all, we use case reports to provide us with incidence data. And this is some of the data that we've heard a couple times this morning. So there have been 4,555 HIV/AIDS cases reported from the first case report in 1983 through the end of 2014. And 45% of those are known to have died. So looking in a little bit more detail at recent cases, there have been 460 cases diagnosed in the 5-year period 2009 to 2013.
Of course, HIV/AIDS is still a fearsome threat. If you're in a risk category, you should do all you can to prevent it in the first place. But now, if you have HIV/AIDS, there is an arsenal of technology that can extend your life to near normal expectancies, all made possible by these remarkable advances in research, some of which is going on right here in Hawaii.
So all in all, this was an important program demonstrating Hawaii's capability and commitment to HIV/AIDS research and to finding a way to eradicate HIV/AIDS in our state.
If you'd like to know more about the Hawaii to Zero program or the speakers involved, visit hawaii20.jabsom.hawaii.edu. If you'd like to know more about the UH Cancer Center, visit cancercenter.org. And if you'd like to know more about HIV/AIDS research in general, visit this NIH site. And now let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech broadcasts its talk shows live on the internet from noon to 5 o'clock p.m. on weekday afternoons, and then we broadcast our earlier shows all night long. If you missed a show or want to replay or share any show, they're all archived on demand on YouTube.
Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our weekly calendar and our live stream and YouTube links. Or better yet, to sign on to our email list and get the daily docket of our upcoming shows.
ThinkTech has a great new green screen studio at Pioneer Plaza. We invite you to come down, see our studio, and be a part of our live audience. Contact Jay at thinktechhawaii.com. Be a part of our civic engagement on ThinkTech.
Go ahead, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or send us a tweet at ThinkTechHI. We want to know what you're thinking and how you feel about current issues and events affecting Hawaii. We want you to stay in touch with us, and we want to stay in touch with you. Let's think together.
On Thursday, January 21st, ThinkTech will join with the Anthology Marketing Group to present a program called Jobs for Hawaii, Working for a Better Future. at the Anthology Theater in Bishop Square.
The program will cover the state of jobs and meaningful careers for the youth of our state, whether the job market is adequate for our workforce and sufficient for the economy we'd like to have, and what our governor, legislature, and private sector can do to provide better jobs and careers to keep our young people here.
Join us and raise your awareness about the critical changes affecting and taking place in Hawaii. Be a part of the conversation and sign up to attend on thinktechhawaii.com.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech, but first we want to thank our underwriters.
Okay, Sachi, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Jay Fidel does. For additional times, check out oc16.tv.
For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a guest or a volunteer, a producer or an intern, and help us reach and have an impact on Hawaii.
Thanks so much for being a part of our ThinkTech family and for supporting our open discussion of tech, energy, diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode. I'm Richard Melendez.
And I'm Sachi Slomoff. Aloha, everyone.
Yeah, both of you were there. You'd be like, you don't say a word, you just like point from your hands. That would be pretty awesome. But I would like to see
Let
like
it go.
butterflies or something.
Let it go. Let's smack it.